So here we go. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we will get going. And let's see. I should be able to, like, 1 moment. I need to start the What are you seeing on your end?
There's a picture, trauma-induced dissociation and the Wheel of Wholeness.
Does it look okay?
It looks great.
Perfect. So it isn't presenting the way I imagined, but we will go with that. Here we go. You still see it?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. So this is my agenda for today. And you still see the screen? Do you see the agenda?
Yes, I can see the screen. You're quite quiet. My
okay, I will get closer.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Better. Yep. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about dissociation, and we're going to talk about trauma. And we're going to talk about something I call the Wheel of Wholeness, which is kind of a working tool when you work with dissociation. So what is dissociation? Is it always bad? Why do we pathologize it? Is there any other way we can see it except from pathologizing it? And then the presentation of the Wheel of Wholeness, the question about who is the expert of trauma dissociation, and something called epistemic justice, which is about this, like the experts versus the lived experience expertise. And then a little bit about institutional dissociation and kind of a play with words like violence-informed care instead of trauma-informed care. And how can we move forward to create more awareness and more space for lived experience expertise? And this is a little bit about me, for those who haven't met me before. I'm usually saying firstly, I'm a human. And then I'm an ecotherapist, I'm a rewilding therapist, and something I call peer therapist. I'm a trauma-sensitive mindfulness instructor and equine and animal-assisted interventions facilitator, cognitive science master student. I study psychology, psychotherapy, social work, social science. And I do have a belonging at Lund University in Sweden, but I mostly see myself as an independent researcher scientist, or maybe rogue even. I'm an artist, writer, photographer. I'm something called lived experience consultant, which means I use my own knowledge and my own experience of dissociation and trauma. I'm an educator, trainer and supervisor, an advocate, activist, a feminist, and I'm incredibly stubborn with a little bit of a Pippi Longstocking outlook on life. And we are not so many in the live session here, but please interrupt whenever you want, and please take care of yourself. This can be a triggering topic, so do what you need to do to stay emotionally safe. and tell me to slow down, speed up, explain, whatever you need. And please be critical. I love feedback and I love questions and I love it when we think together, but also be kind. And if you talk lengthily about something, I might interrupt back. I'm a very direct person. I'm known to be provocative. I don't mean anything bad with it. I'm not out to make people angry, but I usually pinpoint things and say things that's provocative. And this is our space together. I might be the inviter, but I love co-creations. And if there is anything you need to ask about me or this presentation or anything else before we go on. No. And just, as I said, please interrupt whenever you want. You just unmute yourself and then you can ask questions. So a little bit about the terminology. Words have power. I'm trying to make a distinction between dissociation, which is a normal human behavior, and trauma-induced dissociation. I am trying to use as little medicalized language as I can, but for clarity, I use trauma. I could use adversity or something else, but trauma is what people call it. I avoid pathologizing language, and that includes diagnostic terminology. And I come to this topic from multiple perspectives. So I've already told you I have my own lived experience, but I also studied it for years and years and years, and through research and through psychotherapy trainings, psychology studies, all kinds of things. But still, I'm representing some different models, and it's good to remember that a model is not reality. It's a model. And if we speak about realities, we all live in different realities anyways. And I am political. I have an agenda with doing this. It's not only about understanding dissociation in individuals, but I think a lot of our institutions are very dissociative as well. So I'm trying to tie together both how people who've been through trauma experience dissociation, but also how they are met when they seek help, for example. And I will come back to this picture, but just for now, this is the biomedical lens and like a model of how often psychiatry, who is in the fundament of how we see trauma and stress, also in psychotherapy. So the black box, people experience trauma and or life stress. And if you go to the red box, they will usually experience emotional pain, fear, suffering, and real life consequences. But then enter the biomedical model with calling it a mental illness or a disorder. And often they don't go back to trauma and life stress, but they say...
Excuse me, are other people seeing a new slide? Because I'm not seeing a new slide, I'm just seeing the title slide.
Ah, good that you are saying that. I will stop sharing and redo it. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
Because I don't see it from here.
It's so difficult when you're presenting because you can't see what people are seeing.
No, I have no idea what you're seeing. I only see what I see. Maybe I will do then with, because I have it in the PDF and a PowerPoint. We try the PowerPoint instead. And I will do like this. So I was here. Can you see it now? Yep. Okay. And then you missed a couple before. but maybe you followed anyways. And I will get back to this picture. So what is dissociation? And this is one perspective, or from one angle. In early and severe trauma, it's very common for survivors to use dissociation as a defense and survival strategy. And often later it becomes a coping strategy as well. So this is the trauma-induced dissociation. And dissociation is a form of disconnection. And you can disconnect from basically anything or anyone. And it can be a disconnection between body and mind, or between the outer world and your inner world, between self and others, between parts of self and parts of others, which is a fragmented or selective relating. It's like I usually give an example of, you might fear a person who is maybe your parent, and you disconnect from them, but you like their hands, for example. Sometimes they hold your hand in a nice way. So you only connect to that. Everything else is disconnected. You can disconnect or dissociate from the past, of course, from reality, from the present moment, and yeah, as I said before, from basically anything or between anything. And to complicate things a little bit, when is an activity a dissociation? Is a distraction a dissociation? Like when we talk about how you can help yourself if you're dissociative, we often talk about grounding strategies. So people help themselves with walk in nature, listening to music, watching a movie, maybe go out running, making art. But these things aren't they can also be a way to dissociate. So it's not about what you are doing, it's about what kind of feeling you get from it or the result from it. And we might see more easily that playing too much digital games on a computer would be dissociation, but we wouldn't normally see, for example, a walk in nature as dissociation. So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. So as I said before, dissociation is a disconnect. It's a disrupture of an associative process. So something is disturbing the association and the connection is broken. And it becomes a disconnect, a disassociation, or normally we say dissociation. Wow, and we don't say disassociation anymore. People used to before. So is it voluntary or involuntary? Can people help that they dissociate? Do people choose to dissociate? And yes and no. It's a bit complicated. There is something in the dissociated person that is driving the dissociation. But you can ask yourself, or we can ask ourselves, when does dissociation change from being a protection or survival instinct to a habit? So if you learn to dissociate to protect yourself, you might just go on doing that forever and ever, even if you don't need it. So maybe a better question is perhaps if it's a conscious choice to not or not to dissociate, and if it's not, can you make it conscious? And this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. I think you heard it before. Between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And this is from his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I think you know all about him, but I'm just saying it anyways because he survived Auschwitz and he did it by choosing. So he felt he had a purpose in life and he chose to survive, basically. And he says this, that the choosing comes from creating a pause. And when you can pause your reaction, because normally when we are in pain or we're suffering, we react. But if we can pause, we can choose our response. So it's about practicing this pause and make the choice possible, which is of course really, really hard if you are very dissociative, because then you are just reacting and then you're also hiding from yourself. So this is basically the work if you want to come out of dissociation, is to be aware enough so you can start making choices. And you need to be equally aware of how you dissociate as how you associate, because the association, the pathway, the how you associate things is also leading to what's normally called triggers or activators. Because association is how we learn and remember. And this is important. The dissociation comes into play because we need to protect ourselves from associating things. So we don't want to remember, we don't want to learn about something, and we disrupt this association by dissociation. Does it make sense? You're following? Yeah. So you can say basically that dissociation is the opposite to association or contiguity. So this awareness is key. And this is true for individuals as for institutions. If you don't know that you're dissociating, you won't see that you have choices. And if we manage to create that space, that pause, we can give ourselves this possibility to move out from having automatic reactions to things that feels threatening to us. And we can start to become responsive instead. That means that we are choosing how we show up. And this goes from an individual to a group or a big institution. It doesn't really matter. And frankly, it doesn't distinguish between reaction and response, but I think this distinction is important. It makes more sense. Because when we are triggered, we react. And if we can pause, we can give a conscious response. We can choose. And I play a bit with words here, so I bring in this contiguity term. And it's just because when I talk about dissociation, if you haven't experienced it, it could be hard to grasp what it is. The contiguity is something that's bordering to something or staying in connection with something. And this is what's disruptive. So this is just another way of saying the same thing. So when something comes towards us, a stimulus of some kind that is overwhelming to us, our minds partially or fully abort this association by using dissociation, and that's protective, which results in that our memories are fragmented from this event that overwhelmed us. So they usually, like, you compartmentalize them, so you have maybe the sound somewhere and you have the visual input somewhere else, maybe a tactile part of it somewhere else, and it's often the timeline is unclear, so it's hard to remember. And this is why triggers often show up like sensory triggers, that you smell something and immediately you are back in a situation, but you can't catch the rest of it. You're just feeling really uneasy or anxious or something. So this is what unprocessed trauma does to us. it fragments us, it fragments our memories, and then we lose our timeline and we are not able to respond any longer. And what do we do about this? So the trick is to learn or relearn, depending on when your trauma happened. Maybe you never learned it. To reassociate what has been dissociated. So it's basically connecting things back together again. This medical model I showed you before, it's, in my opinion, it's as dissociated as the people seeking help. Because this idea of telling people that they suffer from a mental illness instead of listening to what happened to them, that disconnects also the people who are supposed to help you. They also get disconnected from human pain and suffering. And they don't see the connection any longer. So when you enter this helping system, they're so focused on finding out what's wrong with you that your history gets lost. And usually it ends up at a little footnote somewhere in your records. So the whole focus in what's wrong with you and how can we fix you, instead of listening to you and what happened to you. And also, they're not terribly good at dissociation at all. So it can be a very confusing experience to seek help. So dissociation is very protective. It protects you when you are in the harmful situation, but it also protects you from the memory you have afterwards. And it protects you from yourself, your emotions. It can protect you from others, protect you from harmful environments. It can protect you from losing yourself to keep you intact, just a bit hidden from yourself. But that protection is also what can harm you. If you spend a lot of time in dissociation, it usually leads to you losing your agency. So if you're not present in your life, you cannot make choices, you're not really there. So you go kind of on an autopilot, like you become like a robot, which means that you can stay in harmful environments or situations, and it complicates your way of relating to yourself and others in the world. Yeah, you become a person who is sleepwalking through life. And these are a couple of quotes I found on an Instagram account about fighting sexual violence and prostitution. So dissociation helped me escape in my mind when I could not flee physically. And when the memories came and was too hard, I dissociated again. But also, and that can sound helpful, but the dissociation made it possible for me to continue to prostitute myself. Or I cannot feel anything in my life, I can only feel fear. I'm a living dead for others to use as they please. So this is a harmful impact of dissociation. It helped you survive, it protects you from remembering and seeing what happened to you, but it also keeps you from actually living your life. This is just, maybe this slide should have come earlier, I don't know. Because again, it's just to play with words, how to make it a little bit clearer, or maybe it's just confusing, I don't know. But it's, I hope you can see it, like there is the association and the contiguity, and then there is the dissociation and the disconnect and keeping apart. And they're both dependent on each other, so they work together. And often when we talk about dissociation, we don't talk about association. We only talk about the disconnect. Before this webinar, I had a question for somebody who signed up, who I hope is listening to the recording. So when we talk about dissociation, we often think about this kind of worst scenario dissociation when people have multiple parts. And in therapy, there is always this question, should these parts be integrated to one person? Like, is this the goal? And it can be, depending on the person and what they want. But how do you reach it? And I talk a lot about, I renamed my model from the Wheel of Tolerance to the Wheel of Wholeness. But wholeness for me does not imply that you need to be one person. You can be a collective and still feel whole. And I think this is also about parts, like it's only people who have suffered greatly or are so-called mentally ill that have parts. And I don't believe that. I think we all have parts. The difference is that when you suffered, if you have this trauma-induced dissociation, the walls between your parts will be much thicker and higher. So it makes communication between parts impossible. And this is one way that you can become more whole, is to take down the walls and practice communication inside with different parts. And then how a person feel like one or whole could be that they're still like feeling like a multiple, or there are different words for this, or they feel just like one person. That's different for everyone. And to get there, what is needed? Self-acceptance, self-love, self-care, self-awareness, willingness and courage, building each part up, and at the same time, as I said, dismantle the walls, but slow in the pace that the person can stand, one brick at a time. Work on groundedness, anchoring in presence, owning one's dissociation, owning one's past, present, and future, like all your parts having a common timeline. And I find it very helpful to have ways to express parts and whole. So I work a lot with expressive arts. Ideally, people have a caring community. That's not always, because if you suffered a lot of trauma, you might have lost your community. I also found experiential learning immensely valuable. It bypasses thinking with only your mind. So your body can be present and help you with the thinking. So is it easy to spot dissociation? I would say it is when you learn what to look for. But it's as a protection, it's not meant to be spotted, because then they lose kind of the protectiveness. So a person who has multiple parts would usually not be spotted, because that's the point with it, that they show up like anyone else. But if you get to know them and if you pay attention, you can learn how to see this. And once you have, it's easy for you to pick it up. And this goes from people who have multiple parts to all kinds of dissociation. So we will speak more about that. There are different ways to dissociate. It's not only about having parts, because it exists on spectrum. And that's true for, again, individual as collective processes. And dissociation covers everything from daydreaming, zoning out, in a boring meeting, being lost in your thoughts, not paying attention to your surroundings, to dissociating away from your body, your reality, your past, or even your identity. Dissociation is about not wanting to know, not wanting to feel, not wanting to remember, not wanting to be. And this is an explanation from another angle. Dissociation is a state of mind. It's an experience, an abstract one. It's also an experience that can be physically felt, an embodied one. It's an activity, you dissociate. It's a theory for trauma. It's become, through the years when I started studying dissociation, it's more and more showing up. In the beginning, it was like really super scary for everyone and nobody knew anything about it. It's also a kind of a philosophical debate, like what is consciousness and what is it to be human and what is social justice? What does it mean to be present? And so on. So this is a picture of the spectrum. Highway hypnosis is this kind of dissociation that most people recognize when you drive your car or you go for a walk and you've been there so many times that you stop paying attention to the environment. And when you get home and somebody asks you what you saw, you hardly remember it. And this, almost everybody does that. But you also daydream. It's really, a common way of dissociating. You would recognize being numb sometimes, but then maybe you have not had out-of-body experiences or heard voices. Maybe you don't have multiple identities. So there is a spectrum. And this is one way of putting yourself in there, like if you would like to map out what your dissociation could look like. And I think I say that a little bit later on, that getting to know your own dissociative profile, it's really a good exercise, and especially if you work with people, so you know where you are in this. These are other common symptoms of dissociation. So headaches, blurriness, fogginess, other kind of vision disturbances, burnout, extreme exhaustion, fatigue, unusual pain perception, anxiety, self-harm, suicidality or suicidal ideation, unusual ways of eating or not eating at all, or rigid eating, avoiding touch or being very touch-seeking, unusual sense of time, sleep problems, nightmares, night terrors, flashbacks, and so on. And you would recognize also these symptoms. Many of them overlap with other so-called trauma-related disorders, but also just any kind of what's called mental disorders. So this is, again, I think we all have parts. And if you are what society would say functional, you have good communication between your parts. But usually through life, there is a sliding scale, and sometimes you are not aware of some of your parts. Because whatever circumstance we are in affects us. And this shifts. But if you're highly, highly dissociative, and you have a dissociative identity, you might have parts that have separate names, ages, genders, personality traits, personal histories, all of this, as a form of protection. But no matter how separate or how together they are, how well they communicate will define how present you can be in your own life. Any questions so far or comments? Anything it's unclear? No?
I'm just thinking, so my ex-husband, who arranged arguably for me to be drugged, doesn't want to speak to me because it's too painful for him. He knows what he's done, and he said he's apologized, and it's just really, really difficult for him to look at me or speak to me now. So that's a kind of dissociation.
Yeah, it is. He doesn't want to remember. Yeah. So he's actively pushing it away. And he doesn't want to be in contact with the emotions that goes with this memory. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's protecting him from something that feels too much for him.
Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we trusted doctors.
Yeah. That's the common story, unfortunately. And which is why I really like to, speak about this part of the institutions and how they behave towards people, because it's connected.
Yeah, when we were young, we thought that all doctors were on the side of the angel.
Yeah, that's what you're taught, basically. Like they're authorities, and they're kind and caring, and they always know best, and they always want what's best for you, and we trust that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're not alone in that. There are so many people.
Sadly not.
No, sadly not. Yeah. And if you have a really strong dissociation, the different parts of you will show up as they are like totally separate, like they live their lives in different silos. And this is, again, back to our societal systems. They are often really, really dissociated from each other. Like you have the social welfare care system over here, you have psychiatry, and then you have something else and something else, educational systems. And they don't speak to each other. They send people between themselves, and there is no communication. So the places that are supposed to help people are equally dissociated as the people who have suffered trauma, which is a really, really great, huge problem. And it means that nobody has an overview and that the system is as fragmented as the people coming there, which is really confusing for everyone. And therefore, there is not much help to get.
We've got a lot of talk in this country about the Nottingham murders, Baldur Callaghan.
I read about that, yeah.
Yes. And the father of one of the victims is a doctor, and her mother was. And he is trying to hold the failures of the institution of psychiatry, which let out Callaghan to kill his daughter, accountable. And he put on X yesterday or the day before, a letter from her name, Lade Smith, who is the president of the Royal College of Psychiatry. And she says in it, we've got to strike a balance between this desire for us to be held accountable and the necessity to, or the ability to recruit more people to our specialism. And Dr. Kumar is saying, this is outrageous. As doctors, we must expect to be held accountable. But Lade Smith is trying to say, oh, well, we only need to be a bit accountable.
Yeah, and I think the systems themselves struggle. So I think many people working in them are very, very overwhelmed. Yeah, and they see that it's not working. but they also feel isolated and they don't know what to do. So they just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know what to do. I'm just a cog in this machinery. It's not my fault or my problem. And they go into protective mode themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
My former husband served as treasurer of Mind, one of our mental health charities for 9 years.
Mm.
And now he is chair of Mind Retail, which is the body that oversees all the Mind charity shops in this country.
Okay.
And he made a really odd comment to me that Lade Smith, whom he knows at Mind, would make mincemeat of me. And I said, oh, really? Well, I'd love to meet her. Please, may I?
Yeah.
But the meeting has not been arranged.
We have in this country,
Sorry?
in the UK, is that we have been brought up to believe that the National Health Service, no matter which part of it, will be the panacea to all evil.
Yes.
And it is very easy, unless you're an argumentative old cow like me, to believe what you hear. You don't question it.
No.
And what I discovered after my stroke, and I was in hospital for 5 months, and I have subsequently learned what the system actually involves. And what you find is the people are lovely.
Yes.
People,
Yeah.
doctors, nurses, whoever it is who works for the NHS wants to do a good thing, wants to do the best they can. They want to help you. Unfortunately, their hands are completely tied by a system that is not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And they can only prescribe what NICE agree to. So they prescribe any old thing, really, as far as I can tell, in the hope that it might possibly touch the spot. Well, I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that. They really treat symptoms, they don't treat the underlying cause.
No.
And unless you are tough enough to advocate for yourself, then you get sucked into that system.
Yep.
And sadly, either you totally believe them, or you become very depressed, or you become very hopeless, or you dissociate from the whole process because it's not working for you.
No.
And I wouldn't, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have had that experience or that belief. But I feel that once you're in the system, never let go of you. And one of the ladies I was in hospital with, actually, she was quite funny. She said, "Oh, I feel like I'm incarcerated.
Yes.
I don't feel like, this is doing me any good at all." And it is such a non-real environment that to readjust is actually really difficult for people, and you have to be quite tough to survive that. So the people in the NHS are lovely. The system is crap.
Yeah.
And that is across the board. Doesn't matter whether it's mental health, physical health, anything else. The actual system is not fit for purpose.
No.
Sorry,
it's true. And it's true. It's true in so many countries. It's the same. almost everywhere, at least in the West. And when you come to these hospitals or clinics and you are really severely dissociative, you're going to get really confused by the way you are responded to by an equally dissociative system. So the system will keep you fragmented and dissociated mostly. So it's as you say, it's not fit for purpose, it's not working. And I think we need to build another system. That's my conclusion. I don't think we can fix it. I think we need a new system. Yeah.
Joanna Moncrief thinks that mental health or the treatment of emotional distress should be put into social care.
Yeah. Yeah. I think social care and I think community care. I don't think it belongs in the health system. It's not, because it's not a disease, it's not a disorder, it's not an injury. It's human pain and suffering and the human condition. So yeah.
It's the problem though, it's very often the communities that have caused the pain and the distress, and that
sometimes it is, yes.
community doesn't care.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think there needs to be many different services that offers different things, but because different people would need different things. But now everybody's just shoot in one direction. You know, we're taught that if you are in emotional distress, you will seek psychiatry. End of story, basically.
Yeah, but we have more talking therapies and Dicteria group in the country.
Yeah.
The alternatives are growing.
I think it's growing again. It had a kind of a backlash. It grew in the 70s and 80s, and then it was stopped. And now it's coming back again. And I really like that. So there is some hope.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I just mentioned this about dissociation as an association again, because if you work on your dissociation and you slowly come back to making choices, it's important that you do it slowly. So you pace yourself, and otherwise you can have this, you know, it hits you again and you start to dissociate more again. But once you learned how to dissociate as a coping mechanism, it's not going to go away. So you're going to use it. You're going to see that you use it in all kinds of different situations. And when you become aware, you can actually own it and use it instead of it owning you. I usually give the example of when I go to the dentist, because I hate going to the dentist. I dissociate on purpose because I can do that now. But then it's helpful. And I want to say something about, because dissociation is interesting, because it's a kind of an alienation, like you alienate both parts of yourself, but also parts of other people or situations. And that can sound bad. It's protective, but it leads to troubles ahead. But actually, it also helps you preserve yourself. So if you wouldn't dissociate, you might have fragmented even more. And you possibly would become what we would call insane. Like you would lose all of you. So dissociation protects your core somehow. And that core is really important, because when you have the possibility later on in life, it will contain who you are, your values, who who you could potentially grow into when you get the chance. So it's this is a little red duck. Like if you've lived in an environment and you want to make other choices, maybe you can't in the situation, and you can't later on because you're still so dissociative, but within you, you have this seed, and you can choose differently from whatever family or whatever you grew up in that was hurtful and harmful. So it's really, that's an important part of it. So I mentioned before that I have lived the experience of dissociation, and I have, and this is part of my, I've been severely dissociated, and that comes from trauma. So I was very disconnected. I lost a lot of time. I was really just seeing parts and details and not wholes of either people or situations. I had a lot of altered consciousness. I found myself feeling and thinking that strange things happened to me. I had no memory why I was in a certain place or how I got there, and had this altered sense of time, altered sense of self-confusion, sense of inner turmoil, inner conflict, extreme fears and trust issues, lots and lots of triggers and flashbacks, insomnia for years, and nightmares and all of this. So I'm not only speaking about this theoretically, I know what it is. And when I sought help, I had the most strange reactions from the so-called mental health care helpers. Some would pity me, some would doubt me, some would have this huge need to save me, others would pathologize me or close down. They would be disgusted with me, they would rage towards me, they would be worried about me, they would feel a need to distance themselves, or they would need to prove themselves as very open-minded when I tried to share a bit about my reality. Some would ridicule me or explain away the whole as this is totally normal. Some would shame me and blame me, some would dominate me, and a lot of them would like to be the expert on me and not let me be my own expert on myself. And none of this was helpful in any way. It just made everything worse. So then the question is, are you present when you are dissociating? And again, it's complex, like yes and no. You can, or you are sometimes present, but in a different way. You can be present in an altered state of consciousness. Part of you can be fully present, putting the rest of you into hiding. A part of you can be fully present and others can be co-present. Or you can be totally gone. Or you can be fully present. Or fully present at any of your parts. I don't know if you heard about the theory of the structural dissociation. This is usually how dissociation is explained. I don't like it. And I want to remind people of it's only a theory, it's not the truth. So the idea is that if you have really early trauma, you don't have the chance ever to integrate yourself into one whole person, so you grow up kind of fragmented. I don't think that is true, actually. And that doesn't feel true to me. I think everybody is whole, and then they dissociate when they need to. So they would dissociate away the parts.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please interrupt.
When I was 8, well, when I was 7, I moved school. Prior to that, I went to a Church of England primary school where I remember being really happy at my little table with my friends. And for some reason, my parents decided I had to go to private school. And so off I went. And when I was 8, this horrible teacher organized the other girls to chase the fox around the playground. And I was the fox. And dozens of them chased me. And I would argue that I have not been integrated ever since. I felt like an outsider ever since. So I guess marginally, structurally dissociated. Me looking at the fox, thinking, what do I have to do to belong here?
And if this theory and thinking about yourself as being structurally dissociated works for you, I'm happy about that. I don't like the theory, but
I don't know. I've never heard of it before. I just wondered.
Okay, Google it.
Okay.
It has a language that's really patronizing, I think.
Okay.
And it puts your parts into some kind of hierarchy, like. So when you go to therapy, the therapist would only speak to certain parts of you and ignore the rest of you. And I feel that's really strange. And it's also, when you say it's structurally dissociation, it's like your personality broke, or it's broken, and that's not what I think. I think dissociation is something we do, not something we are. So.
Yeah.
It's the same with like any kind of personality disorder that would tell you that your personality is disordered, and I just hate that, because like,
oh, so do I.
Yeah, it's like, no, something happened to you and you use some coping strategies or whatever you need to get by, but there is nothing wrong with you as a person. Your personality is not broken or damaged or disordered. I think that's
Yes, it's
so
terrible.
and this falls in the same category somehow.
Okay, I won't identify with that then.
Please Google it and see what you think.
Will do.
Just my ideas. I really like this quote. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I'm large, I contain multitudes. Walt Whitman. And I think this is true for most of us, actually. So I've been speaking about dissociation and trauma a bit back and forth, and I want to present this idea that I have about the Wheel of Wholeness. And it came about because I tried to use the models that was already there. So I'm assuming you heard of the window of tolerance by Dan Siegel. So he says, you're supposed to be in the middle of your window, and you move a little bit like in the middle. And if you go up in the window, you are hyper aroused. And if you go down, you are hypo aroused. And if you're hyper, you will be anxious and moving a lot and all of this. And if you're hypo, you will go into shutdown and be quiet and tired and all of this. So it's a very hierarchical and simplistic model. And I use it a lot because I think it's a really good introduction to think about how we can, this is like this hype term, how we can regulate ourselves. Everybody's speaking about, dysregulation, self-regulation, all of this. But this is the point, like, if you are going too high up and being hyper aroused, you then need to have some tools to bring yourself down. And same if you're hypo aroused, you need to have something that helps you bring it a bit up. And these little red crosses out here, they are like symbolizing trauma. And if you don't integrate your trauma, they will live outside of your consciousness. And they will shrink your window of tolerance. And the idea is by integrating them, your window tolerance can expand again. And the little ones, this is just showing like your window can be really small if you have a lot of trauma. So this is the most common model, the window of tolerance. And this is another one called the polyvagal ladder. And I think you have heard about the polyvagal theory. It had its hype a couple of years back, but it's still like used a lot. There comes some critique now against it. And I know when I voiced my critique a couple of years ago, people got really angry with me because a lot of therapists really fell in love with this. So instead for a window, you have the ladder, and here you're supposed to be up top. So when you're in your ventral vagal mode state, you would then feel safe and be able to be social. And then if you have something happening and you react, you would then be activated into flight or fight. And if that doesn't help you, you would go down and be immobilized, collapsed, and shut down in dorsal. And this is also very hierarchical. It's like very clear again where you're supposed to be. And it doesn't say anything about dissociation. Actually, the polyvagal theory is presented by or invented or developed by Stephen Porges. I actually was in communication with him and asked about how he fitted into dissociation, and he had no answer. So this is my kind of academic critique about these two models. They are hierarchical and linear, a bit nuanced, I think, either or, a bit simplistic. And it doesn't take multiplicity or parts or the whole into account. And it doesn't speak about the spectra. And it's based on people who identify as what's called singletons, like you are one person with one name and one identity. And it depends on you living one timeline at a time. They think it's square, rigid, and it's undynamic, both of them. So I tried to use these models when I was trying to help myself and others. And the description I got from many people, including myself, like we felt that we were all over the place. We weren't just up in the window, down in the window, up in the ladder. We were like everywhere at the same time. And also in the polyvagal ladder, if you're social, you are safe. And I have many distinct experiences of being social but unsafe. And it would be what's called the fawn response. I would be in pleasing mode, in fawning mode. And I would still be very social and very active. So I wouldn't be shut down or I wouldn't be hyper, but I wouldn't feel safe. And with these kind of unnuanced models, it's hard to like see how, because dissociation is very dynamic. So it's very hard to fit and experience dissociation into these two models. And they don't speak about interoception, like the feeling inside. They don't speak about how you can be hungry but not hungry at the same time, for example. And I really wanted to come up with something that could be more helpful for people who dissociate a lot. So I made this model instead. So I turned it into a wheel. And instead of being hierarchical, so the center of you is in the middle. And then you can, and I want to show you the next picture, because then you can map yourself out. And here it's only fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But each spoke you can add whatever you want. So you can have more nuanced versions of fight and flight and freeze, for example. Or you can put in totally different emotions. But then you will get a picture of yourself, like a snapshot of where you are right now in your dissociation. So this, if this was a snapshot of me right now, I would be in fight and a bit in flight, but I would not be fawning and not freezing at all. So this is more dynamic, and you can be all over the place. You can expand all over the wheel, or you can come together and be in the center of you. And this is just a play with the wheel, because of course the wheel can also move, like, so it's showing how, because when you're very dissociative, often you are in multiple states at the same time. It can feel really confusing. So it feels like there is a lot of movement, a lot of things is happening all the time. Or either you have stuff, feelings, emotions, things coming to you in really quick succession. So I call it Rolodexing, like you would go in and out, quick switching. You would be moving from one thing to another really, really fast, which is also really confusing. And this again is just another play with this wheel idea. Because, and then you would be in the center again. And you would be having these layered experiences. You can be in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, all of it at once. Or you could just be in two of them, maybe. And of course, you can add whatever emotions. So you can be scared and happy and hungry. You can be all kinds of things at the same time. You're not just in one emotion or one state of mind. You can be in very different ones at the same time. And I think this goes for everybody. It doesn't just apply to people who dissociate, but they usually recognize themselves in it because it's such a concrete feeling. This is like their life. Does the model make sense to you?
Can you explain what fawn is again, please?
Fawn is appeasing way of being. So, and often if you're dissociative early in life when you're a really small kid, you will use it a lot because, of course, the grown-ups are the ones with power and you have to appease them. So maybe you will escape a beating if you are really like a good girl and you can be really like helping or taking care of your mother or whatever you need to do. So you learn a lot about how to fawn. Would you in that moment just shut down? That could be dangerous for you. So you always use the coping strategy that would keep you most safe. And as a child, it's often the fawn. You have no ability to fight. You're too small. You can't flee because you don't have any money. You are nowhere to go and you're just a kid. You can shut down and sometimes you will, but fawn is really, 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 it's really common.
Thank you.
So both the polyvagal ladder and the window of tolerance is about learning to tolerate your own emotions, basically. And this model that I came up with, I think also it's easier to see how we are in this crossroad or mix or mess of emotions, and that they are often contradictory. The tolerance is about being able to hold the tension of your different emotions or inputs or thoughts and still make good choices. But I think I wanted, so in the beginning I called my model the window or the wheel of tolerance, but I shifted into calling it the wheel of wholeness instead. And if I would critique my own model, it's complex and it's messy. And it doesn't give anyone any simple answers, and it doesn't give anyone simple instructions, because if you're a therapist and you use the window model, it's like, oh, my client is up, I need to bring them down, or they are very hypo and I need to help them up. So that's easy. But if you have somebody who's dissociated or up and down at the same time, then what do you do then? So my model doesn't fix that, but it shows a picture of it at least. And this is the invitation, like, for everyone to look at your own dissociative profile. And as I said, I shifted to calling it the Wheel of Wholeness instead of tolerance. And that is a little bit inspired by, I want to show you the next picture, like something called the Circle of Capacity, but by Kathy Melchiori, is an expressive arts therapist. And she really reacted to this word tolerance, and she thought about it like, people should not really just tolerate things. It's like, because there is so much more to life, you should not only like survive and tolerate, you should also be able to have joy and experience good things. So she came up with this circle of capacity. And inspired by that, I did change the name of my model to the Wheel of Wholeness instead. And this is just another model I wanted to show you, because I think using the wheel or circular models instead of hierarchical ones is helpful. And this is the power and control wheel that was invented, or how to say, developed already in 1984 by Domestic Abuse Intervention Program. It builds on the same idea, like it's a dynamic model. And this again, I come back to this institutional dissociation. I think the invention of so-called mental disorders has really messed up, and it stops us from actually helping people. And if you have received a label, it's really hard for other people to see beyond that label. So you will carry it, and it's really hard to get rid of them. Once you got them, it's really hard to get rid of them. And when I got a diagnosis of being very, very dissociative, people get scared of you. Like, they don't know much about it, and they thought I was very dangerous. It's really silly, really. It's just a protection. And not only the institutions, I think the whole society is dissociated. So in many healing, would call like many people who speak about healing want to speak about that healing is relational. And it's not possible to be relational when you're so dissociative. And that does not only go for the client, but the institution itself. They would claim that they are relational, but they aren't. They can't be. And that goes from everyone. Claire said before that the people working in NHS are really like lovely people, but they're still somehow cut off from things. They feel disempowered and confused often, and they don't know what to do, or feeling overwhelmed and exhausted.
And they can't make complaints or express concerns about patient safety in case they get bullied by their superiors and lose their job.
They're told to be more detached and disconnected. And that's supposed to be professional. But you should not care as much. You should not relate as much. And even like in psychotherapy trainings, that's a stance. Like, you should detach yourself, then you are more effective. as if taking care of people who are in emotional pain and suffering is some kind of surgery. And of course, it's not the same. Like, you can't be clinically cold and help somebody who is in distress.
There's a real stigma, isn't there, about bringing one's own lived experience to one's professional and working experience, you know, even if it's directly relatable and even if you have good insight and good understanding, there's still quite a stigma and it's very much resisted, isn't it? It's really hard.
It's seen as unprofessional.
Yes, yeah.
Which is really, and it keeps this division and this disconnect in place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's seen as unprofessional. It's also seen almost as weakness.
Yes.
As weakness, because it's almost like you know, I mean, I could say, you know, I am incredibly resilient because of my lived experience and my learning through that.
Yeah.
And yet, if I know that I limit my expression of that, so I limit all that I could bring to my professional work, because I know that I will be seen as somehow weak or, you know, ineffectual or something, you know.
And I know, and I kind of stopped holding myself back.
Yeah.
I worked because I have my psychotherapy training from the UK, so it's not approved in Sweden, so I can't really use it like in the system. It's not allowed. Yeah. So I worked as a peer support worker for 1.5 years, and then you're supposed to bring your lived experience. Yeah. But again, it's that system doesn't work either. It's because there is some kind of professionalization even.
Yes, exactly. We have similar in our mental health services. We have this thing. Well, certainly where I am, we have peer support workers, and yet what happens to them is they get all this, like you say, all this professionalization, and it's almost like educated out of them that what they're bringing. You know, it's like they're kind of. Yeah, they're kind of headhunted for their lived experience and then they're just put back in a box. It's just so frustrating.
One thing I noticed when I was in hospital was that there is a knee-jerk reaction, and it is almost overzealous because they are so terrified of being sued.
Yeah.
Everything in their power to prevent that happening. And sometimes that can actually be quite oppressive and not terribly helpful.
No.
Because the tendency is to jump in before something happens rather than see if it even does. And it's because they are absolutely terrified of being sued.
Yeah.
And living and working in that type of environment is very toxic, very unhelpful, very disempowering to the people that are in it, be they patient or employee. And until that mentality can be changed or moved, they're always going to be like that.
Yeah. I've seen so many situations where they pretend they act in the best interest of the patient, but it's all about protecting the professional. So they overreact and they call the police, or they pin people down or restrain them, or they do a lot of really horrible things because they are scared themselves and they try to protect themselves. And then they pretend that it's for the person, and it's not. And it's just traumatizing people even further. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on in these systems. And I think this idea that we need to maintain the difference between the professional and the so-called ill people, it's really, you know, excuse me swearing, but fucking with people's minds, because it's like, we're all just humans. We can all suffer. We will all go through hardship. We will all encounter pain. To pretend that there is one category of people who go through this or because they are mentally ill, and then we have the other very healthy, mentally healthy group supposed to help them. It's not true. The division is false. But it's making a mess of everything.
I have to confess,
Yeah.
I have an aunt. I had 2 medical doctor aunts, and they are both vile bullies. And one in particular used to be a consultant in one of the Birmingham hospitals, where the culture of denial and cover-up is rife.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same everywhere. It's horrific. This idea, I think, like about mental illness, because then we don't have to ask people what happened to them. We can just focus on what's wrong with them. And yeah. So I'm coming back to this biomedical lens because this is what it is about. And so the people come with their traumas and their life stress, and they seek help, and they are in emotional pain, fear, and suffering, and they have real life consequences. Maybe they don't have any money anymore. They get fired, or divorce leading to financial problems. And then you go to the hospital and you're told you have a mental illness. And you need to have a mental illness because otherwise they can't help you. They need to diagnose what's wrong with you because that's how the system is built. And then whatever happened to you just becomes a footnote. It's not important anymore. It's all about your mental illness, and psychiatry is stepping in, and the loop is over here now, and you are stuck in there forever. And finding your way out is very, very hard for people. And if I learned something by being a peer support worker, I met people who've been like decades and decades in psychiatry, and they have huge trauma, and nobody cares about that because it's all about what kind of diagnosing. It's a human rights violation. It's the WHO is even saying that, like, we can't continue doing this. So, of course, then people speak about we need to get more trauma informed, and often it's just something they say. And they forget that they need to look at themselves, because the most important thing if you work with people with trauma is that you know your own traumas, your own stress, your own possible neglect, or whatever you have experienced, so you don't start to project that out onto other people. And most people who work like psychiatric nurses or they are not taught self-awareness. They're not taught to self-reflect. So if something feels off, it will always be the so-called patient's fault. It's never about the professional. So, and if they get scared because there is a lot of, commotion and people get agitated, and the people working there, they feel a need to protect themselves, and they will start to manage their own fear by managing the person in front of them instead. So they will not even look at their own fears or whatever stress and things they have in their life. And of course, they will also start to, protect their own status and reputation and the outer image. And the one in front of you will become less and less important. And in the end, they will become a nuisance. Like, you will sit to drink coffee with your colleagues, and you would talk about these horrible mentally ill people who you call them all kinds of things. As a peer support worker, sitting in these treatment conferences, or what they're called in English, and listening to how my so-called colleagues, different professions, talked about patients that came to the clinic, that was beyond everything. Like, it was horrible. They talk about people as if they are not humans, even. And it's very patronizing and degrading and ridiculing, and it's plain horrible.
What sort of things did they say?
You know, they would joke about people being suicidal, and they would call some young girl who really, you know, struggled, and they would just call her manipulative and you know, make jokes about borderline and yeah, yeah.
I believe you. I've been sectioned, and
Yeah.
the nurses would stand there and just talk about the appearance of people.
Yeah. Make funny of the hair color and you know, everything is allowed. And yeah. So when people ask me what being trauma informed is about, it's this: know your own triggers and your own reactions, your own responses to suffering, pain. Know about your own lenses, be comfortable with your own emotions, dare to listen to people and trust them and trust yourself. Acknowledge that terrible things happen, even if you cannot imagine them, and also know that little traumas can accumulate and cause great suffering. So it's not really about all this. I have a longer training, and I bring up some examples of what institutions list on their lists, like this is being trauma informed. And it's not about it. It's not about, you know, diagnosing PTSD or whatever, or you know, staying calm. That like could be helpful in some situations, but if you don't know yourself, you will get triggered by suffering people, and you will think it's about them. You would not know about your own triggers, and immediately you will start to protect yourself. So how can you work trauma informed? You listen, you believe, you do not pathologize. Underline our common humanity. We're all just humans walking each other home. You are consistent in showing up and being present with the person in front of you. You let people take the lead, both direction and pace. You don't know how they will best live their lives, and you should not impose your ideas about a good life onto them. And I think building in lived experience expertise for real, not in this tokenized way. They didn't like me in the end. I had to quit as a peer support worker because they wanted peer support workers who liked the system, and I didn't. And when I talked about, you know, iatrogenic harm and how part of my trauma was about what psychiatry had done to me and other so-called treatments, they didn't want to listen. That's not what they want. They want peer support workers who love psychiatry, who present themselves with their diagnosis first and their name second. Hi, I'm bipolar and my name is like, yeah. So not only with a dissociated mental health care workers see their own dissociation in their so-called patients, they will also dissociate from the reality that has harmed their patients. Sometimes they dissociate from their own pain and project it onto their patients. Other times they're just in general dissociated from the harm that people do to people. They don't want to know about it. They don't want to know about the atrocities in war. They don't want to know about trafficking, sexual exploitation of children, domestic violence. They don't want to know about any of this. They prefer to talk about sending people to bipolar school, or you know, what kind of medication they can switch. And they don't want to talk about reality. So the people who would know most about all of this is the people with the lived experience. And those are the people they don't want to listen to. And it's it's so mind-boggling to me, because I survived a lot of trauma growing up, and I survived the system. I survived the so-called treatments. I survived it all, and I know a lot of things about it. And they don't want to hear me. They because it's too threatening. It's really strange. They don't want to know. I usually joke and say psychiatrists, the only like business in the world who doesn't want to hear what their customers think about them, because they don't want to change. They're happy with the idea that people are mentally ill, and they don't want to know about reality, and they don't want to know that they are hurting people. So it's very frustrating, very, very frustrating. This is my idea. I love Freire. I don't know if you read him. He has a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And he was all about helping poor people getting educated, not only learning to read, but learning to think, so they could change their circumstances. And he has this quote: if the structure does not permit dialogue, the structure must be changed. And this is what I think about our mental health care system. They don't want to have a dialogue about it. They don't want to speak to the people who actually know the harm it causes. And then I think we can't fix it, we can't save it, and we need to build something else. And I write about this kind of systemic critique. I try to, from different angles, post about it. And people often jump at me for being mean to the people working in the system, and they don't see that it's a system. We're all caught in it in different ways, but we need to look at it. We need to change it, and it's not about pointing out individual psychiatrists or individual therapists or whatever and say that they are bad people. Of course, there are some really, bad examples, but there are also really, really beautiful people. So it's not about that. It's about looking at the institutional dissociation and what I call violence-informed care. Because how on earth did we end up here? Building institutions that are supposed to help people. Instead, they are so dissociated and from the people and their experiences. How can we change this? How can we help the mental health care system be more accountable? Dare to look into their own darkness, their own dark practices, and do some introspection. And my conclusion has for a very long time been that though I was diagnosed with a dissociative so-called disorder, I have always been less dissociative than the system that diagnosed me. I know my reality. I know where I come from, even though I've, hid some of it from me to survive. I have and now I don't have any problem facing it. So what needs to happen? So people come in the black box for trauma and life stress. This is what they experience, emotional pain. And I think supporting people having agency, making choices, building communities, good communities that people can choose if they want to be part of, that would leave people feeling supported, and then real life change can happen. So part of it is to organize communities like Soteria, for example, advocate for true inclusion and of people with lived experience, not only as decoration or tokenism, like not only being the case examples, but actually being part of developing the research. and also help people, because if you experience a lot of trauma in your life, you might not have had the opportunity to even go and study. So help people, get into academia, even if they haven't the same basic schooling as others. Support each other by showing up for each other. I've been part of this. Sorry.
I think this is very difficult, because I think that, as you've described it, the dissociation of these systems means that we're kind of almost trauma bonded, and it's really hard, therefore, to show up. We're in competition with each other sometimes. I mean, I have a sibling who is less able to function than I am, and our relationship is completely fractured because of exactly what you're describing here. That, I have found a way to manage use my dissociation, if you like, to function and hold down a job. She hasn't, and that has caused such discord and such fracture between us that we are, we can't be around each other. It's just not possible for us to coexist. So I think it's really hard in the context for this to happen. What you're saying needs to happen. I think I agree with you. That's what's needed. I think it's hard, and it's not supported at all.
No, on the other, it's worked against.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you don't get funding and all of this. But I think still that on a grassroots level, this is what needs to happen. And just by us coming together tonight and sharing, our experiences, I think this building networks and webs of people who want change. And we might not have all the answers right now, but we need to start somewhere. And just by wanting it's a good start, I think. I don't have all the answers. I'm annoying to the system, and I still keep on sending abstracts to conferences, and they'll have me sometimes. I really have tried work in the system, work outside the system, but still critiquing them. Sometimes I'm just tired of all of it, but we need to build another society, another way of living. We're killing ourselves. We are turning on each other, as you say.
I agree. Do you know, my aunt organized my drugging. It's so unethical, it's unbelievable. I was told by another doctor that what she did was really bad. She did it without seeing me or speaking to me. And she thought that I would be drugged for the rest of my life.
That's it.
Because that is the protocol.
Yes.
So she would happily go around saying to the chap in the village shop, for instance, "Oh, I'll pay the bill when my father died, because Sarah won't remember." And he told me that. The shopkeeper told me that. She said, "You won't remember." And I thought, oh yeah, I see.
Yeah, the picture of you as mentally ill and not coping. Yeah. Oh, you muted yourself, Sarah. I can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
This person that we can have drugged and use as the family slave to do the cooking and gardening will never be able to tell the story, because she'll be on drugs for the rest of her life, because that is the protocol. She didn't predict that I would find an osteopath, which is what happened. Who said, "This is ridiculous. You don't have any kind of disorder," and weaned me off the thing.
Good for you. You were lucky.
I was very lucky.
Yeah.
Were it up to the NHS, I could still be on the things now.
Yeah. And then after years and years, it's so hard to come off them. So you get sick by that instead. Yeah. I was fortunate because I realized in my 20s, when I was locked up in these places, that if I stay here, I will die in here. So I fought my way out, and they predicted I would be back in a heartbeat, and I just stayed away. And I've stayed away since, because
I wanted to die when I was hospitalized. I mean,
yeah.
They say that the fastest way to insanity is to put somebody into solitary confinement.
Yes.
Well, in this posh private mental hospital where she arranged to put me, everybody had their own room. So you were in solitary confinement.
Yeah. I spoke to a Danish lady a couple of weeks ago, and when people ask her, she says that psychiatry saved her. And people, oh, yeah, that's good then. That they were good. And she says, yeah, but that was after they made me want to die. So I think this was the same for me. I got so suicidal in psychiatric care that I hadn't been before.
Me too.
And I think it's very, very common.
Yeah.
And also on these medications, some of them will remove whatever obstacle you have from actually going through with it. So it will make you more impulsive, many of these medications. So people run off and do all kinds of horrible things towards themselves and others due to the medications.
Yes.
Yeah.
They increase suicidality.
Yeah.
People have killed their children.
Yes. Horrible things.
Antidepressant risk is a non-profit in the UK that is very aware of these sorts of things.
Yeah. And I stopped working in this clinic like September, and all the people there, all the patients were on this cocktail of drugs. Nobody knows how they interact with each other. They were just so drugged. And of course, they looked really sick because they couldn't think and they couldn't, find their words. And young girls, horrible. Yeah.
Yes, I remember not being able to read.
Yeah, no.
It is chemical death.
Yeah. I couldn't read when I was on these medications either.
Yeah. And I met somebody the other day who had been in the same hospital as me. And he hasn't escaped. So he's on drugs 30 years later. And I could tell from talking to him that he couldn't formulate his thought. He still thought, he had paranoid, persecuted thoughts that didn't make sense. It was terrible.
Yeah. I think actually the medications, psychiatry is producing mental illness.
Yeah. And it's very, if you get off the medication, you've lost all those years of normal life and normal experience.
And that's such a grief to take care of.
Yes. And we don't know, I don't think, what damage is done to the brain.
No, we don't know that. We have to live with the consequences of the treatments we have received.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is kind of my last slide. So again, how do we move forward? I don't know if you're familiar with the PTMF framework, our threat meaning framework. I believe it's one good way of moving forward. Other kinds of relational models and community work I already mentioned. And recovery reframed with a lived experience framework. Now, when I worked in psychiatry, they talked a lot about being recovery oriented. And when I asked them what they meant by it, they couldn't define recovery. So it was just a word they used. But recovery means be functional again, so you can go back to being a cog in society. It doesn't matter if you are drugged beyond your senses and deeply unhappy, but if you're functional, like, then it's a success and you are recovered. Epistemic justice, I think, is an important concept. So decentralizing knowledge and distribute agency. Again, inviting people with lived experience to co-produce services. Not only in these co-opted roles we spoke about. And there is this mad studies people. I'm not part of it in that sense. I do my own stuff. But I think they are also crucial to this because they do their own research from a lived experience perspective. And that's important. And there is, of course, many other ways of how we can move forward. I just wanted to, give a couple of examples. And if you want to go and get in contact with me, this is my contact information. I write a lot. I advocate a lot. And I can't really stop because it's really, I've seen, because when I was a psychiatric patient, and the aim got out, I thought for years and decades that I was just, very unlucky. Most people probably had much better experience than I had, I thought, and it probably was my own fault, I thought. And then when I worked as a peer support worker, I realized how systemic this is, and this is actually how it's built to function. And I wasn't more unlucky than anybody else. Everybody stepping in the doors, like, don't go in there, because then you lost your agency. And if you are very, very dissociative, you already lost your agency, so you will be used to be treated like shit, and you won't question it. So it's so easy to fool you. So that's my presentation. I talked a lot, and thank you for jumping in and interrupting me with reflections and questions. Anything else you want to add for tonight? Thank you, Sarah. I will stop sharing so I can see you all at the same time. And it's very dark in my room.
And here. Well, thank you very much, Alicia. That was really helpful and interesting.
I hope it gave you some, I think you thought a lot about this already, so maybe there wasn't so much new for you. But put together, I'm trying to connect the dots, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will send the slides.
So
Sorry,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will send the slides to you if you have any use for them, and I will send the recordings to everyone as well.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you for showing up.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. I had a little group here.
Nice to talk. Nice to have friends to talk to about it.
Yeah, same for me. Very nice. Okay, I will close the session. Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Cheerio.